And hello out there, everyone in podcast land, and welcome back to the Front Row Podcast, the podcast for people who actually like movies and television. And the very last episode of the year of The Row Knows Nothing, our Game of Thrones recap. We jumped in season 7 because, we've been watching it all this time, but now we have the guts to talk about it. And we are doing the entire season 7 recap right now. We are going to be breaking down what we thought of this year, what stood out to us, and give a little bit of some predictions about what's happening next year on Game of Thrones, the final season. I'm Jeremy Geckner, and here with me, the newest member of the Front Row, Lou Harry, just launched his show, Guilty Pleasures. Lou, what is up?
Not much. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here, talk about this season, put it to bed, and get us something to think about for the next, 18 months, is it?
Oh, God, just way too long.
It's insane.
My son's going to be like 1.5 by the time, and he still won't understand, and that's just so sad.
That's fine. They're little kids. It's just, it's dragons and it's princesses and warriors.
Zombie armies and stuff.
Just shield his eyes on a couple of scenes. It'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I just wanted to give you a really good shout out there, though, Lou. The Guilty Pleasures. I listened to it the other day. Loved the show. Loved the concept of it. Kind of like it's like a movie courtroom in my mind. It's like, somebody has to come in there and defend a movie like that, like advocate for it. It was a wonderful episode on The Last Action Hero.
All right. Well, thank you. And we got some good ones coming up. We've got kind of a slate of movies. Some good guests lined up. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to keep building off of that first episode. Hope everybody liked it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're not listening to Guilty Pleasures, get your butt in gear and do it. Not that there's any other shows anywhere on the Front Row Network, but that one is truly, truly fun. So, all right, so let's just get into Game of Thrones here. We had a lot of stuff go down this season. A lot of people had some problems with it, with the pacing, with how fast things moved in these 7 episodes. Lou, let's go with you here first. What were your overall impressions of the season as a whole? Like, what did you think of how the creators and the showrunners did in season 7?
Overall, I think I'm higher on the season than most people. I'm not going to go on record and say that it's the best season ever. No. I don't even think it's probably, the top 2 or 3 seasons ever. But I do think some of the criticisms are a little unwarranted. I think those first 4 episodes especially were just killer. And I guess in a smaller season, when you have 7 episodes and 1 or 2 are maybe B- episodes, which I don't think we ever had an episode below a B-, maybe but when a third of your season are 2 maybe okay shows, that tends to make us think that the whole season wasn't great. And I think this season had a lot of great stuff in it. I walked away from it intrigued about what was going to happen next season. I think we got closer to the answers, and I think that's really all you can ask in a season that's not the final season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the criticism on this season has gone too far, personally. I understand, in my mind right now, look, the biggest problem people had with it is that people were jumping all over the map. That, what took us 3 episodes to get to Winterfell in season 2, takes us half of a scene to get to Winterfell in this season, right, type stuff. And I understand that, Game of Thrones is kind of built on that big anticipation, and we get all these characters coming together as one. And, I understand, but at the same time, you're right. I think that gets let's get overshadowed all the amazing things. We have not seen dragons in combat before this season. That's not something we saw.
No, exactly. We got some payoffs. We got some things that we hadn't seen yet that were promised to us. We got that. I guess one of the way I would look at it is this is the first season of the show that I think really felt like a TV show as opposed to a novel adaptation.
Sure.
When you compare it to something like Lord of the Rings, which is essentially 9 hours of walking, traveling to a destination, that's kind of what the first few seasons felt like, because it was constantly building and building, because it was going off of books that had already been established. And so when you speed it up for television purposes, really, I can understand why some people are maybe like, well, why are we all of this kind of continuity maybe has been compromised, but I'll take that over narrative expediency any day. I want to get to the action. I don't need to see how long it took them to get from point A to point B. They're there. Who cares? Let's move on.
Yeah, and like that kind of stuff is most effective when you're building character, when you're giving us, backstories. Like, one of the scenes that I thought back on from a previous season. You remember when Jamie and Brienne get like kind of rescued from everything, and they're having that scene in the bath, like, thing together, and Jamie like really comes clean with how he feels about all of his stuff that he's done with stabbing Eris in the back and all that kind of stuff. That's a scene you would never get in a season like this. But we didn't know Jamie as well as we know him now. We don't need to see him walking or see him confessing his sins in a bathtub anymore. We know who he is. And so that's why I didn't mind it. I really, like if we're going from there. And plus the show creators gave this explanation of not everything you're seeing is necessarily happening at the same time this season. Like when Dany and Tyrion are talking about the line of succession over in Dragonstone, this might be Sam might already be up in Winterfell type thing, like, and I can kind of give it a pass on that. But you're right, like the loot train, the freaking, the battle on the lake, the Night King taking the wall down. I mean, these are amazing, amazing bits of television here in the Game of Thrones sense.
Right, exactly. And I think to me, that's what's ultimately what this season's going to be remembered more for is those moments. I think there are, when you go back all the way to the first season and the narrative arc of Ned Stark, I think is what you remember from that season. Yeah. This season, I think, is going to be less remembered for the narrative arc because it's setting so many things up than the sequences that we're going to see, like the loot train, or like the what's still my favorite moment maybe of the season was the very first scene of Arya just going gangsta on. Like we forget about that moment because it was like, but it was only 6 weeks ago. But man, that is just some baller shit that happened, and that. So yeah, I think it's a season that has some great moments to it, and we are dissecting it and trying to look at it from the prism of the previous seasons, and whether that's fair or unfair, I guess, is up to the watcher.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I always said, like so far in my criticisms of this show, this season kind of feels like a setup, to the next season. It's like I kind of view the problems and stuff I had with pacing or anything in this season, I'm guessing are going to pay off big time in season 8. Mm-hmm. We've kind of set the table. It's kind of like how Iron Man 2 was the necessary evil for the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe,
Yes, right, exactly. It's not the one that you would go back and rewatch if you had the choice, but maybe once you see, if you were to watch the whole thing in totality, you would see how it fits in. Yeah. And the other criticism that I think people mention is how many. It's weird in a show that people are actually complaining that not enough people died.
Right.
No other show do you get that where you're like, wait a minute, we have one whole season left, but I'm kind of disappointed we didn't lose main characters in the second to last season. I mean, come on. And I know that Game of Thrones has the habit of just pulling the ripcord on beloved characters and pulling the rug out from the audience. But do you really, as shocking as that would it really be satisfying to not see some of these main characters in the last season, in the ultimate end game of the show?
Yeah.
I think that's where some of that also, where people are like, well, this isn't the same Game of Thrones it used to be because Game of Thrones would kill people and not care. This time the show creators are saying, hey, we know you care about these characters. That's why we're going to keep them in play as long as we can this time.
Yeah, and also it's just like you can only take like watching your heroes like miserably fail so many times in the show.
Right, exactly.
It's like I don't want to see the Stark children suffer anymore. I'm ready for them to win a few games.
Right. Exactly. And they actually did this season, which they get a W at the end of this one. So good
like,
for them.
God, like the Stark kids are like the freaking Cleveland Browns of Game of Thrones. Man. You're just kind of like, aw.
Which still means they're gonna fail in the end here.
Oh yeah, something's gonna go down. No, but I think it's a pretty good overall season. You're right. Like and this will transition us into what our favorite moments of the season were. and you just mentioned a few of them, but I'll start it off right here though, and just say the Loot Train might be one of the best battles Game of Thrones has ever done. I put it right up there with the Battle of the Bastards. I really do. I put it right up there with Hearthome. I think it has a rightful place there. And I mean, the fact that, you see some of the behind the scenes stuff with how they did the dragon fire and how, how many extras they had to light on fire at the same time. I mean, it's amazing filmmaking. I mean, I know they said they spent like $10 million an episode this season or something. It really shows, but that stunt crew on this show, I mean, just give them all the Emmys right now. Just give them everything.
Mm-hmm. Might as well. Yeah, you should. They're just going to clean house. The technical marvel that is Game of Thrones, I think we're spoiled by it, frankly. I don't know if there's any other show that's going to match this scope. I don't know if there's any network that will shell out the money for a show of this scope. But kudos to them, and they keep upping their game, and they keep finding new ways to surprise us. And I think that bodes well for the last season.
Yeah, definitely. And, so what's a scene or a sequence or anything that really stuck out to you this year?
Well, I'm going to go the other way, and I'm going to pick a couple, probably maybe my favorite scene aside from Arya going gangsta in the first the first episode is the death of Olenna Tyrell.
Oh, yes. What a great scene.
That is, I mean, I'm gonna overuse the word baller in this episode.
Seriously, though.
But I mean, that scene that's maybe the best death in a show that is about death, and the way that both actors handled that scene so well. And I thought the respect that they showed not only for the character, but for Diana Rigg as an actress, and just they gave her that moment. She took it. I mean, and that is a home run scene. That could be an Emmy worthy scene. Who knows? I'm not sure what she'd be, a supporting actress or a guest star at this point. Who knows? But I think that scene right there is great. And maybe then the close second in terms of acting matchups is the face-off that we had and in the last episode between Tyrion and Cersei.
Hell yes.
And just watching Lena Headey and Peter Dinklage just have that moment with two actors that haven't gotten to share a scene in a couple of years now.
It's like season 3 or 4, I think.
Yeah, probably. And just to watch them, just the beats and the shifts and all the nuances that they had together are just. I think I'm mentioning probably at the same time Diana Rigg and Lena Headey, because those two actresses are so good at subtext.
Yeah,
they're so good, and those were some of my favorite scenes early on in the series, were between those two characters, because they could always say something and you knew they meant something completely different. By the looks they gave and the way the lines were read, just perfect stuff. And it's just a masterclass in acting. So, we lose sight in some of the dragons and the epic scope of the show of just how friggin' well acted this show is and how everybody has really just dialed in on their characters at this point.
Yeah. You make a great point. That's just like, for as lauded as the show is and popular as it is, the actors have not really taken home a lot of hardware for this show yet. And it's astounding to me because, I remember discovering Peter Dinklage in a movie called The Station Agent.
Yes.
And he was just absolutely amazing in that. And I thought, this isn't just like, oh, look, there's a little person that can, be a little person. I was like, that's a freaking actor right there. And then when I get into Game of Thrones, I see that he's one of literally the best written character on the show for at least the last couple seasons. Now, I think this was kind of a down season for Tyrion until that last episode. And you're right, that scene, it's been made aware that like Lena Headey and Peter Dinklage are very good friends in real life. They hang out all the time. They room together and stuff when they're on set. And it shows that these are two actors that trust each other, because that's a scene where you have to be very vulnerable with your counterpart. And it really, really shows there. And it's actually a scene that made me like kind of empathize with Cersei a little bit, like because in all honesty, it's so easy to hate her in this show. But, when she gave the reasoning of, no, you don't understand, you killing father opened the door to all of this. Like, she's clearly, glossing over the fact that he didn't do anything and that he's been freaking persecuted by both of them his whole life. But
right.
She's also kind of right.
And that's where I think there's a great villains have nuggets of truth in what they say. Absolutely. And great villains always believe that they're right. And she does such a great job of always being committed to everything that she is saying, that you feel that Cersei believes what she's saying, even if what she's saying is complete bullshit, 98%, but there's still that 2% that's nugget. And that brings up something that I wanted to bring up on the show. And that's a popular fan theory that's going around that stems from that scene. And there is this theory that Cersei was able to compromise Tyrion, and that he is at some point going to flip on Dany, and that and switch his allegiances, or that he already has, and that he has reconvened with his family. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've got some thoughts on it too.
It's interesting. Like, I just read this theory like yesterday, and because a lot of people wanted to dissect what that foreboding look he had when Jon went into Dany's room on the ship was. And the fact that we never see the end of that scene, you have to figure there was some bartering after he said you're pregnant. Now, clearly, clearly a lot of people think she's faking her pregnancy, but whatever. I don't. I think that, I think even Lena Headey herself even came out and said, like, they haven't told me anything like that. So,
right.
But, it's an interesting thing there is that, that whole scene is about family. And the thing he always keeps coming back to is that he's sorry that that her children died. And that he continually keeps saying that he loved them. And in fact, he stops her from stopping him to say, I don't care if you don't want me to say it. It's true. I loved them. So, in a sense, she keeps harking on you betrayed the family. You betrayed the family. You ruined our family. So it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. I think it'd be a pretty big disservice to Tyrion as a character.
Yes.
If that happened, because of how far he's come and how much he's suffered at the hands of Cersei and Tywin. But, it's definitely something to watch for next year. I mean, that's definitely, it makes sense. It ticks the boxes, but now it's just like, I kind of hope they don't do it.
Right. And that's what I'm wondering is, did they put that in there? Is that a bit of a misdirect? Was there enough in there? Because there is enough in there to make sense, because there's the obvious question of, how does Tyrion walk out of that room alive?
Yeah.
and one perfectly good, valid theory is that it's because he's been compromised. Maybe, but at the same time, I agree with you. If that were to happen, if that were to be where Tyrion's character goes, and if that's the end of his character, if that's what leads ultimately to his end, I think it's going to be a big disservice to that character. So I'm hoping that that's not the case, or if it is, it's he's compromised in this circumstance, but he pulls himself out of it. Or he's, it's teased but never permanent. I don't know. But because I think at some point Tyrion has to go out, whether he survives the show or not, should go out as a beloved character, not as a tragic, as a turncoat. And to make him that in the final season would be, I think you're right, would be a disservice and a disappointment.
I mean, it'd be great. I'd love to see the scenes of Tyrion, Peter Dinklage getting to act out that inner conflict, because he can do it so well. Right. I would love to see him get like that meaty stuff there of having to deal with that. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like if that is where they're going, then man, Cersei's powers of manipulation just know no bounds. I mean,
right.
She is so Tywin's kid.
Well, and it would be interesting considering where Jaime is at the end of this season, where he has turned away from Cersei, and you think, oh, good, the brothers can get back together because they've always secretly had this bond.
Yeah.
But the minute he decides to walk away from Cersei is the same minute that Tyrion walks to her. So there's actually, I think, if we talk about this long enough, I can kind of talk myself into this. I think maybe to see, because I think you're right. There is some good inner conflict that could exist within it. I just hope that that's not the end result of the character. I just hope that's not, I hope that where we end up is that becomes his undoing, is because he goes and sides with Cersei and turns on Dany in some nefarious way.
Yeah, and well, I mean, like you bring up the good point of like his relationship with Dany has been a bit strained this season. He's made some bad battle choices, and he's made some comments that she didn't really appreciate at times. I would like to think that their bond is better than that, but again, it's such a George R.R. Martin thing to do. That'd be so like George R.R. Martin. It's just like, oh, you love this guy for 7 years? Well,
yeah. To hell with you.
Yeah, to hell with you.
Now he's an asshole. Ha ha ha.
You called out
my money.
You called out one of the scenes, though, and it's funny that maybe it's just because it's the most fresh in my mind, but the season 7, that scene between Cersei and Jaime in the mountain at the end, I thought Nikolai Calder-Wostall just brought the A game this year. I mean, not that he never hasn't, but like never has. Not that he never has, but it's just like, man, that scene, like when the look on his face when she nods at the mountain, and then the inner struggle that he has to say, I don't believe you, and just walk right past him. I was like, that was so tense. And I literally thought they were going to pull the trigger on that moment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that was going to be your big climactic death of a major character.
Yeah.
But, and I'm not, again, I wasn't ready to see him go. It would make sense in that moment because it would kind of fulfill that prophecy that Olenna gives him from the beginning, that she is poison. She's going to kill you. She's going to be the death of you. And if literally she could have been in that moment. But the interesting thing is how that ties back to the Tyrion moment is you can also now say, well, she let Jaime go because she couldn't stand to kill family. Maybe that was the same reason that Tyrion gets away. Those little nuggets, and that's where I think, again, people have been down on the writing on this season, but there is some good stuff that they planted. They're playing with a lot of misdirection this season, and I think that has led to some good moments. The last one, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just want to really quickly hit on Olenna Tyrell, because that is a character that we lost, and you summed it up so brilliantly. I heard on one other Game of Thrones podcast where they said she's kind of the first character in Game of Thrones to like win her death. She's like kind of the first character to like win the death scene, because I mean, that's how she's been this entire show. She's consistent. Diana Rigg is so great because like Olenna just literally does not give a fuck. And she's just going to say, even before she lost everything, she's going to say whatever she wants. She's a smart ass and everything. Yeah. And even in that scene, like I love how Jaime walks in, her armies are decimated, and she's just like, well, did we do good at least? Like she still doesn't care. Right. And it's just like she owns that scene so well. Like she takes that poison so quick because she knows like, nope, not wasting that chance. I mean, it's just wonderful stuff. I also wanted to call out, I think Kit Harington actually does a lot of really good acting in this season as well. Poor Kit Harington, they just always put him through the physical ringer on this show. Right. You saw like all the time he actually did that, getting buried by mounds of bodies in the Battle of the Bastards, and then they actually tackled him into a lake and everything with zombies. I'm like, just let the man alone, man. Right, I mean, but I don't know how I feel about the sense of him and Dany getting together. It was clearly like one of the most logical choices for this season, but I don't know. I mean, it's clearly, and we're going to get into this in just a second with our predictions for next year, but it's just like, it's going to set up a big conflict, but I don't know, them like making love on the boat and everything, it didn't really have the biggest emotional impact that I thought it would for me. It was just kind of like, okay, well, we've officially consummated it, I guess.
Right, exactly. And I think it's interesting because I think there has been some division amongst the community in that scene, not just for that, but what's happening simultaneously, which is the reveal of Jon Snow's heritage and his lineage, and that reveal that these two are related. And some people, I think some people thought that it was a little exposition heavy.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like, well, we've got to get this information out somehow. Let's intercut it with some sex.
Right.
So we'll keep them awake it somehow. But especially anytime, that should be a new rule. Anytime Bran speaks, maybe they just intercut it with some sex scenes.
The Bran Bot 9000 with the optional sex scene.
I see. Oh, in fact, I see those people doing it down the hall, and we just cut away to some random sex scenes while he's doing it. But
yeah, he basically has free porn for life, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Oh God!
But yeah. But I thought it was again. It was another way to get out a piece of information that needed to get out to elevate the stakes of the show, and again. There's no way that you reveal that. I think when you're dealing with information that you have to get out of a book, like other than them just declaring it and moving on and letting us kind of see this moment that there was good manipulation again by the creators to get us to kind of want these two to get together. Mm-hmm. And then when they finally do, they say, well, here's what you want. Oh, but by the way, we're going to let you know this is incest.
Also, I call it the Zach and Kelly principle from Saved by the Bell. You can't keep them together. You have to give them a wedge to drive them apart constantly and then get them back together and then drive them apart.
If this show ends with John and Danny getting married in Vegas, I'm going to be very pissed off. You want to talk about credibility issues out the window.
I mean, I'd be okay if it was a marriage, but it has to be a Malibu Sands. I mean, I'm just saying. And we now present our Saved by the Bell review show. So that was the one thing. The other thing, really, and again, like I don't know if it's just the freshness, but I just think that last episode was just the best of the season. And like Craig said it in the season finale recap, was that episode felt very Ned Stark and Tywin Lannister heavy, like their presence was felt over that. And now as I look back on the whole season, like Ned Stark's presence is really, really there. And this season really is kind of the children of these great patriarchs that we saw at the beginning of the show, kind of taking those people's place. Mm-hmm. And I just loved how the Stark children come together and kind of find their inner power here. Like, you know, John at that's the one thing I wanted to call out too, was the Dragon Pit War Council totally lived up to the hype. Mm-hmm. But it was just like him in that moment, you know, saying, you know, I don't care if you're going to tell me this is how my dad died. You know, this is what I was taught. This is what it means. If we start lying, then words mean nothing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like it was just a great thing. And that scene after Sansa and Arya kill Baelish, and they're just up on the balcony just talking about, you know, Arya, who's been just this emotional void this entire season, then kind of finally breaks it just to say the simplest phrase, I miss him. I wish he was here. Mm-hmm. You know, like that's just... You could really feel Ned Stark's presence kind of starting to influence his children in the best way after they've gone through this fire. Did you find the same thing?
Yeah, definitely, because I think it's a great callback to tie in. You know, typically when shows end, in the last seasons are usually some callbacks to where you begin to give you some sense of symmetry. And you have to do that in a show like this where the main character of season one is dead. Yeah. And dead by the end of season one. Yeah. And it does make this, if you go back and rewatch the series, which is one of the things I plan on doing in the next 18 months, and see how much of Ned Stark influences the rest, and how much of his kind of fingerprints are still left in the season or in the show. And that's clearly evident in this last episode, and to see whether or not they grow to be like him in terms of his honor and his pride and dignity and his nobility will be interesting. And it's another great example is of how the showrunners kind of played played some tricks on us is because I think I said on this podcast that I was predicting a Sansa heel turn, and I got swerved. And I think and great, good on them to see that she is growing to be more like her father, which is great. And and we'll see if that trend continues and what that means for the end game of the show.
Oh yeah, dude, it was totally like Vince McMahon like being on Austin's side and then flipping at the very end again.
Absolutely. I have been saying for seasons now that one of the reasons I love Game of Thrones is because it's very pro wrestling.
Oh yeah.
And people mock me for that, but there are uneasy alliances, there are heel turns, there are every once in a while, oh, hey, Danny and Tyrion, you got nothing to do. You're a tag team now. And, now Varys is here. We have a new faction. And that's what the end of last season felt like. We were setting up this like gang warfare of like WWE style of these different rival factions coming together to duke it out. So no, I'm all on board with that. The more we can kind of crossbreed my nerdery, I'm happy with it.
I mean, it was definitely like Bret Hart's like Canadian faction versus like the one where the Patriot was there.
Yeah, exactly.
You and I need to talk some WWF, man.
And the Dornish or Los Boricuas.
This is the only podcast where you're going to get a Los Boricuas call out, man. Much love to Savio Vega. Okay, so let's jump and transition here. Anything else you want to call out before we move on, though? I thought, I wish that they would have given Varys a little more to do this year because I love Conleth Hill. I think he's great on this show. And, oh, man, really got to call out Pilu Ashek as Euron Greyjoy. Man, what a great turn. We didn't get enough of him in the later part of the seasons, but, man, what a great first 3 episodes for that character.
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly he's set up to be a major player in the final season too, with the swerve of him seemingly running off like a coward, which again seemed uncharacteristic at the time, and then this was Cersei's plan all along.
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess that's the other thing is just to before we get into predictions, I guess to address maybe some of the storyline beats that I think people had some issues with, and one of them being the Sansa Arya storyline. Does the reveal at the end make the journey worth it to you? Do you think that's because that storyline was pretty maligned while it was happening, and you got that payoff? Do you think that the payoff work for you, or does it redeem what maybe was a seemingly weak subplot?
Oh, I will tell you right now, like, I hated the Arya character, the Arya Sansa getting, like, in between. I hated it until she says, how do you respond, Lord Baelish? And it was just like, it literally wiped the whole thing out for me personally because, and a lot of people were like, well, then they clearly planned this. I don't think they did. I think Arya didn't know that Sansa was going to say Lord Baelish. I think Arya figured that might happen. Because she seems very unsurprised, but I don't think there's a scene where, Bran, Arya, and Sansa are just like, oh, do you think there's something weird going on here? That they just deleted from the scene. I think it was Sansa making the right decision. And, when you think about it, for this entire season, Baelish has been giving her these little nuggets of wisdom, like view all the outcomes all at the same time, simultaneously. Think of the worst possible reason. Think people could be doing something. And, think about it, when Baelish and Sansa meet after Ramsay is, or after she escapes Ramsay in season 6, she says, I'm not going to trust you again. Like, I know what you did. And, and I think it was first time Baelish has been caught unawares that, maybe he let his feelings for the Stark women get in the way, but it's just that payoff to me was wonderful because Aidan Gillen there, man, what a great death scene. The gamut of emotions that we see Baelish go through in that little 2-minute sequence is amazing acting. So yeah, it paid off for me. And I was just like, all right, writers, you got me. Good job.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point that I hadn't really thought about was, I think the assumption was that these two were together from the beginning instead of maybe Sansa dealing with whether or not she wanted to trust Arya or not. And I think that's going to be one of the things that on a rewatch, I think will be very interesting to see what seeds get planted, because people are like, well, why would they have this conversation if they were in cahoots all along? And I think you bring up a point, is maybe they weren't in cahoots all along. Maybe this was Sansa figuring things out on her own, and Arya just being like, well, I'm an assassin. I'll kill whoever, dude.
Yeah. Come at me now. I'm going to kill everybody in here if you try to kill me.
Right. So you just tell me who to kill and it's done. So yeah, I think that'll be interesting to watch when on a second viewing.
Yeah, and I mean, like, just as a little capper there, it's just like, again, the Ned Starkness coming out of Sansa. And I think that, Arya, was never hard for her to be that way. Arya and Jon, it was never hard for them to subscribe to Ned's way of thinking. Sansa was just more of a spoiled brat, and she had to learn the hard way of what happens when you're not a spoiled brat. But I think, it was just Arya, I think, was playing a game on Sansa this whole time. I don't think she was as fooled by Baelish's digging up of the note that she wrote on behalf of Joffrey. I don't think she was as fooled about that as people think. I think that she did understand when Sansa said, they made me write that, and she was trying to get Sansa there herself. Like, figure out this guy, why does he even have this note? Why is this stuff even happening here? So I think that's what it was. And that smile when she says Lord Baelish, Arya, that smile on Arya's face is just good. You get it. You get what needs to be done here. So yeah, I think that was a good payoff for me personally. But let's transition here into some predictions. So I want at least 2 good predictions and 1 crazy ass prediction.
Okay.
That we're gonna do here. So give me one that you think is an ironclad prediction for next year.
The Night King goes down.
Okay, that's a good assumption.
That has to happen. I'm one of these people who I will always defend finales if they fall in line with the narrative that we've been presented. I defend the How I Met Your Mother finale. I defend the Lost finale. I can, that's a whole different story.
I'm okay with both of them.
The one thing I couldn't defend is if we watched 7 or 8 seasons of wonderful, nuanced characters to have them obliterated by a character who's literally never said a goddamn word.
Nope.
So come on. So that has to, and I don't think they would do that to us. So that's my stone cold lock of the century there.
He's going out. Nice. Calling out Mike and Mike now too. Lou, we need to just be best friends, dude. We watch all and listen to all the same stuff. No, but I agree with you. I think it's gonna look. I know Game of Thrones has kind of been the cynical show when it comes to heroes and villains, but that'd be pretty ballsy to just let the zombies win. I think one of the stone cold locks, and I'm going to call it right now, is that I'd say, of the 10 to 12 principal characters we have, and fill out whatever names you want as the 10 to 12 principal characters, I think it's a lock that, like, at the end of this, you get like 3 or 4 that make it out. And I'm including Sansa and Arya. I'm including Bran. I'm including Jon, Dany, Tyrion, Cersei, Jaime, Brienne. Whatever 12 you want to pick. I think that at least 8 are going to be making that. I think there's going to be a lot of death next season.
Wow. Okay.
So that's one of my big ones. I'm trying to think of like which one, because I have one that's kind of crazy, but it's not like the craziest. Okay, well, here I'll pose a question as mine for you then.
Okay.
Do you think that we see Beric and Tormund alive in the next season?
Yes.
Okay, you don't think they died when the wall came down?
No, this is Game of Thrones. If you're going to show it, if somebody's going to die, you're going to see it.
Okay.
Because you're going to show it in some sort of gruesome way. They're going to have a moment. I know we've killed characters off randomly or out of the blue, but we've never not seen them die. Or at least have a moment a beat to acknowledge, like, even if it was him, one of the characters just looking at the wall and just saying, oh shit, and it collapses on them and we know they died. That didn't happen. We didn't see any of that. So I'm going to go with yes. They are alive.
All right, that's one. The only other prediction I'll make is Ironclad. John is so going to ride the other dragon. That's going to be Danny and John riding the dragons into battle. I think you probably agree on that now.
Yes, yeah, I agree. That's got to happen at some point.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. Oh, he'd be riding Rhaegar then. Yeah, so that'd be interesting. He'd be riding the dragon named for his father. That's fun. I didn't think about that before. Okay, so here's one of my crazy ones, and then we're gonna do a little over under. Okay.
Okay.
Here's one of my crazy ones. I think before the season finale, before the final 2 episodes, Daenerys Targaryen is dead on this show.
Interesting.
Tell me why I'm crazy.
I don't think you're necessarily crazy, because that is one of my 2 possible crazy predictions, but my 2 crazy predictions conflict, so they both can't end up being true. But that is one of them. that is one of them where she's going to come face to face with her dead dragon child, and she is not going to be able to pull the trigger, but he is. And I think that'd be a beautiful way for that character to go out, because she's always talked about her children, and at the end of the day, she can't kill her children. But guess what? Your child's already dead, and he don't give a fuck. So you're done.
It's a Pet Cemetery situation here, man.
Well, exactly. So that's one area. So I don't think you're necessarily crazy. I could totally see a scenario where that plays out.
All right. Well, then let's close this out with a little game of over under or odds, I guess. But unless you have another one.
Well, I've got my alternative theory on that. If Danny were to survive,
okay,
and that is, yes, we know that Jon is in line for the throne through his new lineage, but what we also know about Jon is that he doesn't really want to be the king. So if Danny and Jon make it out alive, my prediction is that Jon still bends the knee to Danny and abdicates the throne and allows Danny to fulfill her destiny, because I think that is in line with both of those characters. I think Jon ultimately does the right thing. It may be a little ham-handed, but it's still, I think it's still very consistent. So yes, I think that's crazy, assuming they both make it out. But I don't think if Danny is alive at the end of this series, that Jon is sitting on the Iron Throne.
No, I agree with you. And I'd even go further on that theory. I don't think, if both of them make it out alive, I don't even think Jon ends up King of the North, really. I don't think he even wants that. Jon doesn't want to be a ruler. He never has.
Well, he has no rights to being King of the North now.
Well, yeah, exactly. But
so, which would let, Sansa be able to take over should she survive as well.
Right. But I mean, that's the thing about Jon, though, is just even when he was elected the head of Castle Black, it's just he doesn't want that, really. I mean, he only did that to make the decision about the wildlings. And so it's just Jon's just that blunt instrument of righteousness. And so, I agree with you. If that ever, comes, because obviously the lineage has to be dealt with next year. The Daenerys and Jon both having claims on the throne, that has to be dealt with. And obviously that's why they do the whole intercutting of, Rhaegar and Lyanna's marriage with, Danny and Jon boning. That's why it's there.
Right. Absolutely. And so there's going to be, it's not going to be simple. And I don't think it's going to be the type where people are saying that Jon and Danny's relationship is going to be severed because of this new information. I don't see that. I don't think that either one of them are going to separate from the other because of this. Now, obviously, it's going to cause some friction and some conflict, but I think ultimately it's going to resolve itself in a way that's going to be satisfying, presuming that it doesn't get solved by one of them just getting blown to bits by a White Walker.
Right, exactly. All right, so I've got some over-under games here. Let's play this out here. Okay, one popular fan theory is that Bran is the Night King, that he wargs into him in his Three-Eyed Raven pass. Over under 60%, this is a valid theory.
Under
60%? I agree with
under
you.
60.
It seems like too many hoops to jump through for me. Is that how it looks to you?
Yeah, what does that serve? I guess I also look at the narrative purpose of the story. What ultimately were to happen into that, and I don't think that's Bran's journey.
Yeah, I don't either. Okay,
although it would mean he would talk less. So I may be in favor of it, as nonsensical as it is.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so another fan theory is that the Night King is actually a Targaryen, that he was one of the first men that was a Targaryen, which is why he can ride Viserion right now. Over under 70% that you think that is a valid theory.
I'm going to say under, but only because 70 seems a little high to me.
Okay, you put it more in like
I like the 55.
I mean, the theory, that's one where I can get on board with a little bit, because it's kind of like, well, yeah, we know very little about the Night King. He was a man at one point.
Yes.
He's riding a dragon, and insofar as we know, only one family can do that. So,
right. And maybe I'm just poo-pooing this because the Night King and the White Walkers are maybe, aside from the visuals, my least favorite part. So I don't need, when we only have, what is it, 7 episodes left?
Or yeah, 8? I think Scott says 8. I've heard 6. Let's just call it 7.
I don't need Night King backstory in my last 8 hours of Game of Thrones. I don't. I'm good, bro.
It's the Michael Myers effect, man. I don't need to know why he's evil. He's just marching toward me.
Exactly. Let's kill them and get on with the political intrigue and incest.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're gonna end it here. We're gonna name some characters, and you tell me the percentage you think they make it to the finale through all the way to the end. All right. So, okay. What's the percentage Jon Snow makes it through to the end?
80%.
I'd go 85. I'm going to go 85 because I think that conversation with Beric beyond the wall, where he was like, we were brought back for a reason. We can defend those who can't defend themselves. There's part of me that thinks Jon's going to die nobly for the entirety of Westeros. Like, right. There's a little part of me that thinks that might happen.
Yeah. And that also does solve the issue of Jon and Dany's claims to the throne.
Right. Exactly. Okay. What do you think the odds are Dany makes it to the finale?
I'm going to say she makes it to the finale. I think that, but does she make it out of the finale alive? I think it's less chance than Jon. But it's still fairly high. So I'm going to go with 65%.
I'm going to agree with you. That's the number I was toying around with too. Okay. What are the odds that Cersei Lannister makes it makes it past the finale?
Past the finale, 0.0.
You're not giving her any credit. No, I agree with you. There's zero chance that happens.
No, she makes it. I think the probability she makes it to the last episode is high. It seems insane that you would have the final episode of Game of Thrones not have Cersei Lannister in it, unless just some bonkers stuff happens.
Yeah.
But the odds that she actually survives all of this is like 0.0.
Yeah. Okay, Tyrion Lannister. What are the odds he makes it all the way through?
I think it's 50-50 at this point.
I do too, and I hate that.
Yeah, I do. But he is not he's not the hero that you could have thought might have risen out of the beginning. I think he's an important part to it, but he doesn't need to survive necessarily for his story to end well. Yeah. So I'm going to say 50-50.
I mean, that would just be the worst of it. I would hate that. Okay, Jaime Lannister. What's the odds that he makes it through?
30%.
I think he'll die like trying to defend Brienne, or he'll die killing Cersei or something like that. But yeah, I don't foresee a happy future for Jaime.
Right. I could see a scenario where he and Cersei kill each other.
Yeah, there you go.
He stabs her, she stabs him, they're both dead.
Romeo and Juliet, that thing with a gun,
Exactly. They die in each other's arms, whatever. Nothing. Yeah, he's not standing at the end.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Brienne of Tarth, what do you think?
40%.
I think she makes it. No. I'm really nope. I just talked myself out of it.
No, she's if she gets herself out of this mess with Danny and John and makes her way back to Winterfell, then her stock rises. Because I could see her going back to the North and serving somebody who I do think is going to make it to the end, and that is Sansa.
Yeah, okay.
And serving her. I think that's higher. But if she keeps messing around with the Lannisters, it's not going to end well for her.
Yeah, definitely. I'll agree with you. I think Sansa's a 100%. I think she's making it through. Arya, man, I don't know. The Batman of Winterfell is what they're calling her now, and Batman just survives. I'm gonna give her like a 90% chance of doing there. I like the idea of like Sansa and Arya ruling Winterfell, like one badass assassin and one like noble lady.
Yeah, but I don't think you need her and Brienne.
That's true. That is true. But you see, like Brienne, I just think she is so honor bound to protect them that she will willingly die to protect them. So
right, yeah. I could go 55% on Arya.
Okay, there you go.
It's more likely she'll live than she'll die, but I'm pretty split.
Yeah. All right, we'll do a few rapid fire here of just yes or no. Do they survive? Do you think Varys survives to the end?
Yes.
I didn't hear. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes. I think so too. I think. Well, nope. Melisandre. Nope. I'm going no. She said he was going to die on the continent.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Everything Melisandre says just happens. Beric, do you think we're losing Beric?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Tormund?
No.
You don't think Tormund's going? See, I thought Tormund was gone this year, man.
No, I think we're going to get some fan service there with that character. I think, yeah.
Okay, and then last but not least, two more. Theon Greyjoy. You think he makes it to the end?
No.
Okay.
I think he redeems himself, but he dies.
Do you think that he doesn't make it to the end because he lets Yara make it to the end?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he saves her and dies valiantly.
And that Yara then becomes the ruler of the Iron Islands like she should. That's what I think as well. Mm-hmm. Seems a little too tidy for George R.R. Martin, but still.
But again, this isn't George R.R. Martin creating the finale. These are the showrunners now, and I think you're going to have some level of fan service. I don't think you're going to have a bleak ending to the show. I don't think you're going to have an ambiguous ending. I think the creators are smart enough to know, and I don't think HBO is going to let them do this because I think Game of Thrones as a franchise, not to get too meta in this, but as a franchise, they've got a lot invested, and you can see what happens when a show that had planned spinoffs goes awry. Dexter was supposed to have a spinoff show, and then that last season came out, and oh boy, killed it. So we never got Lumberjack Dexter because of how badly they pooched the landing. So I think you're going to have some satisfying resolutions to a certain degree. I don't know if everybody's going to get out, but I think enough are going to get out to make this satisfying for the audience.
Yeah, all right, just a couple more. Ser Jorah Mormont.
Dead.
Oh yeah, totally dead. Done. Sir Davos Seaworth.
Dead.
Really? Oh man, I want him to survive so bad, but yeah, I think you're right. Gendry.
Dead.
Yeah. Just real quick, one of my favorite things, one of the other shows was talking about Gendry coming back for like the Beyond the Wall episode. And they were like, that's a character that if George R.R. Martin was writing that episode, he would have like killed him on like the boat ride to the wall.
Yeah, right.
It wouldn't even have been Beyond the Wall. It would have been like, oh yeah, he fell over and died. I think we probably lose him and his battle axe. And then finally, who wins the Clegane Bowl? Do we get Sir Gregor or Sandor Clegane?
My money's on the Hound.
I think so too, man. That was so badass what he said to him at the War Council.
Mm.
All right, so that's it. Hey guys, you know what? We want to know what you think, though. We want to know all of your predictions. We want to know what you thought of the season. So jump in the comment section of this video or on Facebook and tell us what you think. This has been really awesome with the Row Knows Nothing. We are, of course, going to be bringing it back for season 8. We honestly can't wait the 18 months here. But in the meantime, to hold you over until then, go to thefrontrowmoviereviews.com and you can find all of the shows we do. There's too many to list, but specifically on here, I know I and Sarah are going to be on the next flashback on Stephen King's It, and then Sarah and I will be doing the full disclosure for the new film It. That'll be dropping this week, and then also watch Lou's Guilty Pleasures. Lou, do you know what guilty pleasure you're doing next?
I don't know which one's coming out next. I have a slate of ones we're going to be recording, and I don't know which one I'm going to get to first due to scheduling issues. But I can tell you a couple of the ones that were floating around here. We're looking at Con Air. We're looking at Grease 2. We're looking at Spice World. We're looking at The Replacements for football season. We've got some interesting ones coming up. And of course, if anybody has a suggestion, please tweet me at the fake Lou Hair or tweet the Front Row Reviews and send something out, because I ain't afraid to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. And you did what I wanted us to do for a while here. You said your Twitter handle, my Twitter handle, at JGeck, JGOECK. You know, get us on there. And then, of course, follow at Front Row Reviews on Twitter. We're getting a lot of great cross-promoting with other shows on Twitter right now. So, all right, we got to wrap it up. We all have kids and bedtimes and stuff. So we hope that you have enjoyed this last episode of The Row Knows Nothing for this year. We will see you again next year. Again, let us know what you thought. But for the Front Row Movie Reviews and The Row Knows Nothing, I'm Jeremy Geckner.
And I'm Lou Hair.
And we will see you in the front row.